Hi, I'm Katie Green.
Hi, I'm Dan Green, and welcome back to the Greening Out podcast. Now, tonight we're talking about the recent Scottish independence referendum, in which 45% of people voted yes and 55% voted no. And joining us to talk about this is writer, broadcaster and academic, and director of the Libertarian Alliance UK, Dr. Sean Gabb. Sean, thanks for coming back on the show.
Well, thanks for having me. I enjoyed the last one, and I expect I'll enjoy this one as well.
Us too.
So, Sean, can I ask, how did you personally perceive this run-up to this referendum? And from your experiences, how do you think it was perceived in England?
In a rather complex way. Okay. Although Scottish independence and English affairs have obviously long been at the top of the Scottish agenda, in England they have been largely ignored, and at last this year the Scottish referendum came onto the radar, and the response was a certain amount of annoyance.
Oh, right.
Yes, and I must admit, I felt the same annoyance. Let me explain.
Okay.
What I followed of the debate was one side saying the English are evil, oppressing scumbags, and we must get our independence from these people as soon as possible.
Yeah.
We have been colonised for centuries by them. On the other side, you had people saying, yes, but the English pay our pensions, the English pay for our free university tuition, the English pay for this, the English pay for that, the English let us use the pound. How do we get on without them? Mm-hmm. And at no point in the debate did I hear any Scottish person stand up and say something like, undeniably the union does not work in the interests of both nations as we might wish it to, and we do need to look very seriously at how the union and its various institutions work. But ultimately we have been we have been a joined nation for 300 years. We have shared historic ties going back over more centuries than that. We have fought side by side in wars, however unjust those wars may have been, for hundreds of years, and the idea that we should divide ourselves into different countries is bizarre. I didn't hear anyone say that. It was just a question of the English are scum, and on the other side, but the English pay our bills, so let's stick with them. And I just thought, yuck. If that's the way these people think about the union, if that's what they think about us, I'm hoping for a yes vote. That's what we thought. And so the implications for Scotland of a no vote maybe almost as unwelcome for some people as a yes vote would have been.
Well, yeah, we kind of thought that ourselves. I didn't hear too much English bashing on my side. The people that I spoke to were mostly pro-independence, were mostly sort of these kind of people that some of them were the kind of people that think that Braveheart is history, if you know what I mean. One of my big problems with this debate personally was I felt people on both sides, instead of actually thinking logically and critically about it, they were thinking emotionally. And I think I know we should expect that, but I think a lot of people's decisions were made with their emotions as opposed to their intellect.
Yeah, of course, there is a good case to be made for Scottish independence, or rather, let's not talk in those terms. There is an arguable case for breaking up the United Kingdom. Mm-hmm. I think I told you the last time I was on, I had a ringside seat in the breakup of Czechoslovakia in the early 90s. And the Czechs and Slovaks, well, it would be somewhat melodramatic to say the Czechs and Slovaks were at each other's throats, but they were not enormously fond of each other. And as soon as the Federal Republic was broken into two separate states, relations between the Czechs and Slovaks began steadily to improve. to the point where nowadays the Slovak and Czech governments are very closely coordinating policy with each other and are actually talking of restoring things like the shared railway management. So there is a case for breaking up the United Kingdom. Perhaps it doesn't suit the interests of the constituent parts terribly well. But down here, all I really heard was a lot of ignorant English bashing, and on the other side, a lot of rather hard-faced men just pointing out that that England is a soft touch when it comes to handing out the readies. So it didn't play down. It didn't play very well down here.
Do you think that's in any way could be because of the media coverage of it? There's been a lot of talk over here, obviously, from various people that there's been a bias of media coverage,
particularly the BBC.
Yes, there has been talk of that. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, you're pushing an open door there.
Oh dear, yes. Well, I know I've read somewhat of what you think of the BBC, Sean.
I'll go for it, Sean. Why not?
not just the BBC, the whole of the mass media.
Yeah,
I do agree that I cannot form an opinion of a referendum campaign when I was not personally in the country and when the only source of information I had was institutionally biased. But I'm not telling you what the campaign was like because I'm in no position to do so. Yeah. What I'm telling you is the perception that many of us had south of the border, and it has left the English with a much harder heart regarding Scotland than was previously the case.
Yeah, see, that's kind of what I thought, because it got to the point here where Katie and I one night were sitting discussing, and we were thinking, if there's not a yes vote, then, I mean, the English are never going to sort of forgive us, if you want to put it that way, in those terms, you know, for all this kind of, well, for all this nonsense, because, I mean, we all know that Scotland has been taking more than its share of English money, and then, you know, you have issues like the West Lothian question, which, for anyone who doesn't know, because we've got a lot of American listeners, it's, you know, that's whether, it's a debate in the UK whether members of Parliament from outside England can vote on matters that affect England only in the House of Commons, for people to know. But, yeah, so that's what I've thought. I've really thought that it got to the point where people were saying, like, we have to go yes or else there's going to be a backlash from England and from Westminster.
Oh, we're going to eat you for breakfast every morning for the next 10,000 years.
Absolutely, yeah, of course.
No,
naturally.
That won't happen. Look, as far as I can tell, and I don't want to be too conspiratorial here because I don't have a very high opinion of the main cast of conspirators. But so far as I can tell, this has worked out very well to the short-term interests of the Conservative Party, and it may work out rather well to the long-term interests of both the Scottish and the English peoples.
Yeah.
When the party leaders went up to Scotland on, was it Monday or Tuesday? I can't remember.
When they cancelled Prime Minister's questions and
Tuesday then. Okay, I got back from Turkey. I can't remember, it was an overnight flight, but I got back and what I saw was the Daily Record rather, with that promise on it, and I thought, bugger. They're going, you know, English subsidies set in concrete for eternity. And then I heard David Cameron's comments in Downing Street yesterday, and the penny dropped. Of course, this is... You should never underestimate the incompetence of these people, but this, if it's followed through, this is a settlement of all outstanding differences between the Scottish and English peoples. It also allows us to go our different ways while remaining within the United Kingdom. Scotland will get maximum devolution. They'll get... can I talk about the Scots as you or as they?
Either or, whatever you like.
I'm not really that
Okay,
bothered.
let's talk. Let's talk in collectivist terms, though we're all individualists now.
Yeah.
You get control over taxes and most spending. You look after Scottish welfare. You look after Scottish education. You control everything except defence and foreign affairs. There may be one or two other things that I haven't looked at, but roughly speaking, you get full home rule. Now, the problem with that so far has always been that Scotland gets home rule. What about those 59 Scottish MPs in the House of Commons? They get to vote on English laws, and that would be that would be rather unjust in the abstract sense if the Scottish election results exactly mirrored the English, or near enough mirrored the English. But there's one Conservative MP in Scotland, and what it means is that in the 2005 election, I think, Labour lost the election in England and formed a government on the back of Scottish seats. Labour lost the election in England very heavily in 2010, but the Conservatives had to go into coalition with the Liberal Democrats because of the Scottish vote. So the Scottish seats give a boost to non-conservative representation. If it had been purely a matter of English general elections, Labour would have won the 1945, 1966, 1997 and 2001 general elections. It would not have won any of the others, and would have had Conservative government all the way through. Now, I'm not saying that Conservative government is any good, but coming back to the point we discussed the last time I was on, the reason I vote Conservative, even though I regard them as villainous scumbags, is because if I don't vote Conservative, there's a risk we'll get a Labour government. And we can't have that. So I vote for the people I despise to avoid the people I fear. Now, Scotland has autonomy. Scotland has home rule. Call it what you will. England no longer has to worry about the Labour bloc vote from Scotland. And so in the short term, we'll vote Conservative because, there's no one else to vote for, is there? In the longer term, we can sack the Conservatives. We can say, look, you people are scum. You really are. You've shredded the common law. You've turned the place into a police state. You've undone none of the bad things that Labour did, and you've added a few of your own. Oh, and you weren't too good before Labour came in, and we're not happy. Either clean up your act, or we'll find somebody else to elect. And so I wouldn't say that there's a vast sleeping majority in England for right-wing libertarianism, but there is a better chance that England, without Scotland, will be able to turn in a moderately libertarian direction than with the UK as it is. And of course, this is again something we discussed the last time I was on. If Scotland has everything that it could reasonably want, short of an army and foreign embassies, then there won't be quite the same room as there has been for the past 40 years for the Scottish Nationalist Party. The other thing is, now what is this agreement? You can vary your taxes. You can sort of put your taxes up to anything you like, can't you? Or your rulers can now put your taxes up to anything they like.
Can they?
Oh, yeah, they get scary what they're talking about up here now. It's
dear.
terrifying.
Yeah, well, the thing is that, okay, in the first instance, you will get a left-leaning social democratic government smarming on about Scottish enterprise and shoving taxes up on everything in sight.
Yep.
Which of course will lead to an exodus of businesses and of people south of the border. And sooner or later, not quite as soon as if you were completely independent, but sooner or later you'll hit the buffers and somebody will have to start tearing down a lot of this stuff. Neither country can afford the welfare state that we have. I'm not saying that we should crap all over the poor by any means, but I'm just saying. But the welfare state as we have it isn't working. It doesn't alleviate poverty. It simply perpetuates it. It also keeps perhaps a minority, but a visible and therefore an annoying minority, in much greater comfort than I enjoy, and I'm a taxpayer. Mm-hmm. And so this will have to be scaled back in Scotland, just as it will in England. And it may be that economic reality will be imposed on the Scottish people, and the English people may be able to impose it on the English government rather better with the new dispensation that Mr. Cameron is promising than has been the case for a long time past. So a yes vote would have been useful for the obvious reasons, but the no vote, followed by the Downing Street Declaration and the binding promises, looks as though it will be the best of available worlds for both of us. We may stop arguing.
Oh, I hope so.
we may start to realise that there is that we do have a great deal in common. Mm-hmm. Genetically, I know that it's not very fashionable to talk of such things, but genetically,
we are the same people.
Yeah.
Yes, we're the same people. We've occupied this island since the end of the last ice age, with a bit of topping up now and again from Scandinavia and from Italy and from here and there. But genetically, we're the same people. We speak the same language. We have had in the past the same commitment to scientific rationalism and individual freedom. Although none of us may be particularly religious, we have the same Protestant heritage. And even if you're not a Protestant, the Protestant heritage will make you a somewhat different atheist from a Catholic atheist. We have, of course, that long history of shared glory, which is much played down by respective ruling classes. But I'm afraid, whether you like it or not, English and Scottish soldiers have been laying down their lives together on battlefields through every continent on this planet for several hundred years. Mm-hmm. And that means something. It means something. So instead of arguing over who owns the oil revenue and whether Scotland gets 20% more public spending than England, and whether, God knows what, do people still whine on about Mary Queen of Scots up there?
Not so much, although she would have been our neighbour. The ruins of her castle are literally 5 minutes walk from our house.
Yeah, funny enough.
You're probably lucky that she's not living there anymore.
Yeah.
Instead of whining on about all of the things that have divided us for the past 40 or 50 years, perhaps we can start to remember the enormous substratum of the things which make us substantially the same people. I can hope that is the case, but you never can tell with the politicians we have. They might mess it up.
That is an interesting point. I'd like to take you back just a little bit, see, because you were saying it could sort of you could sack the Tories in England. This is something that I really noticed, because UKIP were not a part of the Better Together campaign, and no. I suspect that Nigel Farage came to Scotland to campaign for a no vote, because he knows that many Scots hate him and his party, and he knows that the prospect, unlikely as it is, of a UKIP government would entice people, like a UKIP government in Westminster, that would entice people to maybe vote yes to try and avoid that. And I think that an independent Scotland would benefit UKIP, because with Labour out of the picture, like you were talking about, actual Conservatives in England would feel freer to vote for UKIP, because, the whole voting for the Conservatives out of fear of a Labour government would be removed.
It would. One of the reasons why Nigel Farage didn't go up to Scotland very often was because the English and Scottish ruling class, for whatever reason, decided that there would be no English voices on the no side. The No campaign would be an exclusively Scottish affair. I suppose that I can see their reasoning, though I don't agree with it. The reasoning is that to have these plummy, toffee-nosed English up there saying, no, but of course, we are substantially the same people. You really should pull your socks up. And it might not have been tremendously helpful.
No.
On the other hand, a bit of plain speaking from England might have dispelled some of the fantasy in what I saw of the debate. But Nigel Farage was not welcome in Scotland because, he had the wrong voice. Simple as that. Now, UKIP does have some following in Scotland. Indeed, so does the BNP.
Yes.
There are a number of unionist parties up there. Or rather, there are a number of unionist parties through the whole country. And perhaps we may not regard it as terribly desirable that the BNP should prosper as a unionist party. There is a large amount in Scotland of unionist sentiment which, because unfashionable, has not been very loudly expressed. And it really is impossible to explain who were those 55% of people. Were they people taking making a pounds and pennies calculation on whether they could keep free long-term care for the elderly in an independent Scotland, or were they people who found the idea of breaking up the United Kingdom repugnant? We don't know, and we never shall know.
Well, there's been some trouble in the city centre of Glasgow the last wee while with a lot of unionists and yes campaigners from what we know.
But the thing with the unionists here, it's what you would probably expect, Sean. It's people who are sort of young Rangers fans and who don't think about anything critically, and they're like just they get drunk and brandish Union Jacks. And from what we were reading in the news and from what some people who were around the town centre last night told us, they were like singing Rule Britannia while making apparently Nazi salutes, which
that makes no sense.
Sort of boggles the mind a little bit, but that's what we're up against,
Yeah, there is a certain amount of, I suppose if it weren't right wing, we'd all call it postmodern, a kind of blending, an incongruous blending of symbols. I don't know what the Union flag meant to them, and I don't know what the Nazi salute meant. Probably nothing particularly sinister.
No, probably not.
But, okay, on Thursday, we all looked over the edge of the cliff. And although the English didn't have much hand in the matter, we stepped back. And although I've said some unpleasant things about the Scots, and although I have often said that a no vote would be the best thing for England, on the whole, I'm rather glad of the way things worked out. It means that the Scottish will get substantially what they want. Everything short of, as I said, everything short of an army and foreign embassies. And it means that the English will have the chance to get what they want, and we shall remain within a single national structure. So I really don't think anyone can seriously complain about what happened on Thursday. It's worked out better than it might have done.
Oh, but they are.
There's people that are really quite unhappy about it. In Glasgow here, we had a 75% yes vote, and Dan and I are trying to stay kind of neutral on this. We are libertarian first and foremost, and I was sort of looking at it from a secession point of view of smaller government is better, but there is issues like the EU and things like that. I know.
But see, we could just stay on secession for a second, Sean, because what was interesting is we were talking to some American listeners of ours and some friends of the show who were American, and they were very kind of keen for Scotland to vote yes, because for them they thought it could sort of set a precedent, for maybe, they're talking about New Hampshire or Texas, and then you also have Catalonia being inspired by it. So from what the feeling we got from a lot of particularly, I must make that point, particularly US people, was that they were really wanting us to vote yes so that that could set a precedent, because for them they sort of see secession of any context as like a quite high libertarian ideal.
Yes.
What do you think of that?
Well, do you mind if my answer is outrageous and perhaps slightly absurd?
Sean, I would love that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I think secession, in principle, is a very fine thing. And if the Catalans want to break away from Spain, good luck to them. And if the Flemings want to break up Belgium, good luck to them. And if various Americans would like to detach their own state from the grip of Washington, very good luck to them as well. But I feel an emotional attachment to the idea of England, and I would like every square inch of England to remain England. So far as we have a government, I want the government of England to be the government of England. And although I've spent many years denouncing the Scottish as a bunch of socialists and
apart from us though.
Yes, of course.
Of course.
A millstone around our neck.
Right.
When it came to it, I did feel an emotional pull of the idea of a United Kingdom. Now I accept that the idea of the United Kingdom as it exists allows our ruling class to engage in the pernicious delusion that we are still a great power. If you go through the collected speeches of David Cameron, you'll come across frequent collections of words such as, "We punch above our weight. The eyes of the world are upon us." Well, no. As soon as India became independent in 1947, the whole rest of the empire, the colonial empire at least, became untenable. It became unnecessary as well. The colonies of white settlement, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, etc., they were 100 years ago well on the path to becoming freestanding independent nations. And the idea of Britain as a world power was a transitory phase, a phase which has now passed. We are not a nullity in world affairs. It would be very difficult for that to be the case. But Lord Curzon does not rule India from Delhi, and the battle fleets drawn up at Spithead do not disappear into the mist. But so long as we have the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, it does allow these people to strut around on the world stage, and breaking it up into England and Scotland, or into Scotland and the remaining bits, would really have forced these people to put away their moth-eaten uniforms and their rather wilty feathered hats. So, yes, maybe an opportunity was missed, an opportunity for all of us, people and rulers alike, to see the world as it is. On the other hand, I don't like the idea that my country is going to break up. And so that's not perhaps an offensive or even an absurd answer, but it is perhaps an inconsistent answer.
Well, everybody has emotion. We can talk about logic all we want. We're all emotional human beings. We all have things that make us feel good, and for some people that is the idea of a union of the United Kingdom, and for some it's not,
But then as well, that's right, because see, you were saying there about the British Empire, and there is this sort of delusion now that we're still, what it once was, which is not the case as we know anymore. And it's almost like an emotional clinging to something that isn't there. People like to think that we're a big actor on the world stage, when, if we're being perfectly honest, all we are is poodles to America, and the EU, let's face it.
We need to sort out our relationship with the United States. Things can't carry on as they have done. I think our relationship with the European Union is ultimately something that can be managed. I don't regard Europe as the great threat that I used to.
Well, you know what? In the last, you alluded to that in our last interview, but we never went into it deeper. So could you go into that a bit deeper as to why?
Oh, right, okay. The UKIP narrative, the Eurosceptic narrative, to take a non-party view of it, a narrative to which I once subscribed and in which I once helped to impose on the Conservative Party, is that the European Union is an alien entity which has seized control over the commanding heights of our Constitution, and that we need to throw these people off because it is a foreign imposition. The truth, however, when you look at it, is that the European Union is simply a cartel of ruling classes. And without spelling out the long argument, let me say this. Most of the bad things which have come to this country via the European Union started as items on the wish list of our own ruling class. For example, I've done quite a lot of work over the years on the money laundering laws. Now, you could say, well, the money laundering regulations were brought in because of the 1989 Money Laundering Directive. And that is the case. However, what happened was the British and American governments got together and called called together a meeting in Vienna in the late 1980s. This led to the Vienna Convention, which is a United Nations treaty in which countries undertook to introduce money laundering laws. So this is something put up by the British and American governments. They, in turn, by the way, were put up to it by various wealthy and well-connected banks and financial interests in London and New York, which did not want to lose market share in a relatively deregulated age. Now, the way these things work is that the United Nations Convention was copied, word perfect, into a directive of the Council of Europe, which was then copied again, word perfect, into a directive of the European Union, which is an instruction to the member states to make a law to bring certain things about. How we make those laws is up to us. We can do it by primary legislation, by delegated legislation, by changes of policy, but a European Union directive must be obeyed in its substance, but the form is down to the domestic governments. And so we can blame the European Union for having imposed this abolition of financial secrecy or this financial police state on us, but it's a long tale which started in London and New York. Now, because the European Union is a cartel of ruling classes, it means that our ruling class needs to accept certain things which it would rather not have. The British ruling class does not like the common agricultural policy. This does not suit our particular needs. It may suit the needs of the Spanish, the French, the Italians, etc., but it certainly doesn't suit us. It's also very unpopular in this country because it puts up the price of food. One of the differences between us and the Europeans is that in this country, most farmers are tenants. They don't own the land they farm. Whereas in Spain, in Portugal, in France, in Italy, etc., there was 100 or 200 years ago a great deal of land reform, and so the peasants are also the owners of the land. And so the effect in Spain, France, Italy, Greece, etc., of the common agricultural policy is to raise the incomes of the agricultural classes. In this country, because the farmers are tenants, higher agricultural prices then turn into higher agricultural rents, and so the farmers' profits are eaten up by the landlords. And the landlords are, the Queen, the landed aristocracy, which
Yeah.
managed to avoid what was done in 1909, and so it is unpopular. It raises questions about our membership of the European Union for all sorts of reasons. But you see, this is something that can be managed, and the ruling class is willing to put up with it. Now, there are some things done or commanded by the European Union which are not acceptable to our ruling class, and those are ignored. Notoriously, earlier this year, the European Court of Justice said that the British government's law compelling internet service providers to retain information indefinitely on their customers was a breach of the European treaties.
Right.
And so the European Union told our government to stop spying on us. Did our government say, oh, well, we have surrendered legislative supremacy to the European Union institutions, and so I'm afraid we simply have to accept this. We shall have to stop the country from being quite as much of a police state as we've made it. They didn't do that at all.
No.
They passed the Regulation of Investigatory Powers the Data Retention and Investigatory Powers Act 2014,
Wow.
which simply strikes down, it simply overrules the European Union.
Mm-hmm.
So,
insane.
what I'm saying is that the European Union is a device.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fig leaf behind which our own rulers exercise absolute and unaccountable power. The Eurocrats in Brussels, for the most part, do not want. I'm not saying they're libertarians, but they didn't ask the British government. They didn't ask the British government to turn our country into a police state.
Yeah.
And so far as they have any interest in it at all, they're rather inclined to ask the government not to turn the country into a police state. They're rather hostile to all the surveillance and the data retention because it reminds them of certain dark areas in their own past. So I don't regard the European Union as the most important issue in British politics.
Yeah.
The most important issue in British politics, well, at the moment, is sorting out the relationship between England and Scotland. Mm. And unless Cameron is a total fool, which is not
maybe
it's not a stretch.
Yeah.
It's not a stretch, I would agree. But as long as there's some element of intelligence and some goodwill, this is something that will be sorted out to our mutual satisfaction. The next thing we need to do is to sort out the extent of government power that can be exercised over us.
Yeah.
And these are all issues that we need to decide for ourselves. Blaming the European Union or calling on the European Union, neither of those things is appropriate. These are matters we must sort out for ourselves. The European Union has not asked the British government to abolish trial by jury. The European Union didn't ask the Scottish government recently to abolish the corroboration rule in criminal cases. Are you familiar with that?
No, we're not.
I'm a bit familiar with that, but not terribly. But I've read about it. Yeah.
My understanding is that before anyone can be found guilty in Scotland of a serious criminal offence, there must be two independent witnesses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've read that same thing myself.
Yes.
Yeah,
now, I believe that ancient rule of Scottish jurisprudence has been abolished.
Oh.
That had nothing to do with the European Union. Mm-hmm. Now, going back, on a slight digression, you can say, well, English common law doesn't have this corroboration rule, so why should it be such a sacred cow in Scotland? And the answer is this. English common law does not have the corroboration rule and has therefore developed other safeguards of people's due process rights. Because Scotland has the corroboration rule, it has not developed the same safeguards of due process rights.
I see.
And so to take away the corroboration rule in Scotland does not standardise Scotland with England because Scotland does not have the other safeguards. Equally, you might say that other civilized and free countries in Europe do not have trial by jury in the same way as England and Scotland have. Well, that is true, but they appear to have different safeguards of people's due process rights from our own. If we abolish our own due process safeguards because they are somewhat eccentric in terms of our neighbours, it doesn't mean that we shall still enjoy the same degree of safeguards as they have, because every legal system is different. Every nation is different in its history, in its experience, and its expectations, and its legal systems reflect that. Now, coming away from the digression, the European Union did not send out any instructions to Alex Salmond to get rid of this. The double jeopardy rule in England and Scotland, in both countries, this rule has been weakened. Again, nothing to do with the European Union. This is something done to us by our ruling class, and I would actually suggest that that before we start talking about walking away from the European Union, we should sort out the mess that has been made of our own country by our own people.
Well, see, Sean, I think that's quite a fascinating perspective, because it's always been the European Union has always been a bugbear of mine, and I always go straight to the the idea of sort of world government, like a European Union and then like a North American Union and that kind of thing. But what's interesting is what you're saying, that just the mere idea of like leaving the EU will be some kind of panacea is sort of a fantasy, because it's being used as a distraction to hide what our own governments are doing.
Indeed, let me put a more positive case. Do you have children?
No, we don't know.
No.
Right. Okay. In one sense, you're lucky.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
There are growing colonies of British, there are growing colonies of British families in Slovakia, in Cyprus, in the Irish Republic, and all over the European Union. These are people who've been driven out of their own country because we live in a police state run by Puritans and policed by 60,000 social workers continually on the prowl for children to steal away from their parents. And the reason that so many of our people can leave this country and get their children beyond the reach of these evil or lunatic social workers is because when you get to Dover, all you need to do is wave your passport and leave. And when you get to France, you just wave your passport again and you're allowed through. Now, leave the European Union and we are locked into what may be described as the biggest open-air lunatic asylum in the world.
Yes.
Alex Salmond recently said that because of the horror of binge drinking in Scotland, it would be necessary to bring in a minimum price for alcohol, which I have no doubt, though I haven't bothered investigating, is to the benefit of a number of well-connected business interests.
Absolutely, yes.
But he can't do this because it's against European Union law.
Right.
The British government is talking about plain packaging rules for cigarettes, which again would be in breach of any number of European Union treaties and laws, not least of which being it would be a theft of intellectual property rights.
Yes.
Now, I've already mentioned the fact that our government was nearly prevented from all of this data retention stuff by a judgment of the European Court of Justice. And so, again, without saying that the European Union is some kind of libertarian utopia, what I can say is that in some respects, so long as our own ruling class is hell-bent on a police state in this country, membership of the European Union is useful at the margins. It keeps these people it keeps these people from becoming total beasts. And in all sorts of things, the British government is constrained. The European Union is a cartel of ruling classes. There are many things the British government would like to do to us which require consent at the European Union level. Bans on internet pornography, bans on violent pornography, age verification, all sorts of things. They are breaches of European Union law, and so a directive would need to be agreed at the European level. And not every one of the member states of the European Union has a ruling class which is filled with certifiable lunatics. In Slovakia, for example, the politicians are corrupt. If you, as a Slovak journalist, dig too persistently into the financial affairs of certain people in that country, it will not be to your advantage. Let's put it that way.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
However, the Slovak ruling class doesn't care if people smoke in restaurants. It doesn't care if...
Yeah.
It doesn't care if people drink a lot. It doesn't care if children have a drink now and again. It has no objection to parents who smack their children, so long as it's not done in a manner which would outrage a reasonable person. And again, although the Slovak government does not love homosexuals, indeed it has amended its constitution to make gay marriage unconstitutional. Slovakia is the home to Bellamy Films, which is the biggest gay film production company in Europe.
Oh, right.
The biggest in the world.
Okay.
A friend, if I say some of my best friends are gay, I don't think I'm saying very much nowadays. Now, some of my friends collect Bellamy videos.
Right.
And there's two actors there whose names currently escape me, who are cousins, and they're filmed having sex with each other. And there's two other actors who are, I think, under the age of 18, who are twin brothers and who are also filmed having sex with each other.
Bloody hell.
Yes, I know. Now, Slovakia doesn't have all these PC laws about, you mustn't call someone a poof. But the Slovak government doesn't care about this. And there's no equivalent to the Daily Mail out there screaming blue murder when two twin brothers have sex on camera.
Yeah.
And so if you want bans on certain kinds of porn, you come straight up not just against the Dutch and the Germans, but you come up against fairly traditionalist Catholic countries like Slovakia, which don't see this as a problem. So long as no one's forced into it, and so long as children are not forced to take part or to watch it, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And again, I would say, just in case I have been misunderstood, I will say again, Slovakia is not a libertarian utopia.
Yeah.
If you are an investigative journalist in Slovakia, there are many things which you will leave uninvestigated.
I see, I understand. I agree with you in the fact, Sean. I think our government in the United Kingdom is far too invested in our personal lives.
Yeah.
Well, of course, because it's this whole nanny state thing. I believe I've heard you say, Sean, and I think it was a speech about libertarianism, that you're mostly libertarian because you want to leave people alone and you want people to leave you alone. And I think that's probably the most basic way to explain libertarianism to anyone. Like consenting adults can do what they like.
Yes, exactly.
As long as it doesn't hurt anyone.
Exactly. But see, going back to the European Union, there's nothing we can do about the common agricultural policy. That's set in stone. The only way we can free ourselves from the common agricultural policy is to leave the European Union. And yes, I agree that in the long run we must leave.
Yeah.
But the vast mass of police state laws which have been heaped upon us since the early 1980s, those have nothing to do with Europe, nothing at all to do with Europe. The the abolition of the double jeopardy rule, that didn't come in from Europe.
Yeah.
And if it did, would anyone care to explain why in several Australian states the same derogation from the double jeopardy rule is made with exactly the same wording as in the 2003 law that our own Parliament passed?
Mm-hmm.
This is something done by the English-speaking countries, not by the Europeans. They don't care about this sort of thing. So the enemy is at home. The enemy is our own ruling class. I saw an interesting slogan on the internet the other day.
Yeah.
We go to war when the government tells us who the enemy is. We make a revolution when we work the question out for ourselves.
Oh,
I like that, I really do.
And so let's sort out this national question between the English and the Scottish, and let's hope that it can be done with speed and goodwill on both sides.
I know, I hope so.
And then let's sort out these scum politicians.
Oh,
let's
yes.
Let's try and bring them to heel. And yes, if you want this country to be as free as you want it to be, we've got to leave the European Union.
Mm-hmm.
But Europe can wait. Europe can wait. The European Union ideal is one big vacuum cleaner factory, preferably managed by the brother-in-law of someone important. Now, that is of course outrageous.
Right, of course.
But speaking personally, I don't buy a vacuum cleaner very often, and I can live with that.
Yeah.
What I don't want is, I don't want a government that seems likely to tattoo barcodes on our foreheads.
Oh God, no.
which is the way we're heading at the moment.
Yeah.
Let's sort that out.
So, there's a lot of talk about an EU referendum. I assume just now it's all talk. But do you think if that came, say for example that came soon, say for example that came next year, I'm not saying it will, but just, for talk's sake, do you think that would be a mistake to jump into that so quickly without sort of putting our own houses in order, so to speak, first?
It'd be madness. In the first place, because I no longer regard the European issue as of burning importance, I'm not sure how I'd vote in such a referendum. But what happened last Thursday has it has changed the landscape of British politics.
Definitely.
And what would happen if we had a referendum on European Union membership and the Scottish voted 70-30 in favour of staying in the European Union and the English voted 60-40 in favour of getting out? Now,
Do you think at that point we might be forced into a secession?
Yes. It would be a shotgun divorce, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah.
It seems that way.
And I don't think that would be in anyone's interests.
Mm-hmm.
So I rather wish that the problem is eventually we've got to leave the European Union. If we do have a referendum in 2017 and we vote to leave in the way that I've described, Scotland wants to stay, we want to leave, that brings on another constitutional crisis, which we don't really need. If, on the other hand, we all vote to stay, even if it's a narrow margin, then it means that leaving the European Union comes off the agenda for the foreseeable future. So it's probably best if we don't have the referendum. I don't know David Cameron's quite good at wriggling out of promises.
Yeah, promising
perhaps
backbenchers things that he won't deliver on.
Mm-hmm.
yes. So I don't know. I can't give a straight answer on that. The reason we need to leave the European Union is that if we want to be as free as we'd like to be, we can't stay in. We need to get rid of the common agricultural policy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that may mean some other system of subsidising British agriculture in the interests of national defence.
Mm-hmm.
But the common agricultural policy is not the way to do it for us, because we have a different kind of structure. There are many other things that are required by European Union membership. Oh yes, having VAT, for example,
Yes.
which is a terrible burden on small businesses.
Absolutely.
Of course.
All of these things, they're a nuisance, and if we want to get rid of them, we need to leave the European Union. But at the same time, there are so many big things that can be changed in this country
Yeah.
without getting so much as a hard look from Brussels, and we need to concentrate on those. And so, I'll repeat myself. The first issue in British politics at the moment is to sort out Anglo-Scottish relations. Yes, they are a Freudian slip. They're Anglo-Irish. There is an example of how to send everything tits up, isn't there?
Oh, yeah.
I was in Bodrum last week and talking to an Irish friend, and we were just going over the history of our national relations. The Irish uprising in 1798 was overwhelmingly a Protestant affair.
Oh, yes.
The Catholics...
Wolfe Tone, am I right?
Yeah, he was a Protestant.
Yeah.
The Catholic Irish fought on the British side to put down the uprising. It then turned, because of a series of criminally stupid acts on our side and on their side, into a ghastly uprising of the Catholic Irish, which was put down with the most terrible atrocities. At the end of that, however, the government in London said, right, that's it. We're shutting down the Irish Parliament and we're having an Act of Union. From now on, there will be 86 Irish MPs in Westminster. Oh, and because Catholics could sit in the Irish Parliament, we will allow Irish Catholics to sit in the British Parliament. And everyone accepted that. Most people in England and Scotland accepted it because we couldn't. This was the price of pacifying Ireland. The Irish accepted it because it was a good deal for them, the best deal they'd get in the circumstances. And then that silly old fart George III suddenly stood up and said, "Oh no, it's in breach of my coronation oath. You can't make me do it." And so we had the Act of Union without Catholic emancipation, which had to wait another 29 years and was forced out of the British government by the threat of revolution in Ireland. And every time when it has seemed likely that there would be some reconciliation, something it just hasn't been very lucky. And we don't want that to happen with Scotland. The British party leaders made a promise last Tuesday. They've got to deliver. And at the same time, the reciprocal of that is that Scottish members of Parliament leave the House of Commons. The current representation has been cut from 59 to, shall we say, 6, because there are United Kingdom issues over which the Scottish people should have some control. But you see, the Scottish members of Parliament should not be allowed to vote on things like English and Welsh rates of income tax.
Oh yeah,
that's
absolutely.
right. Yes.
How the English organise public health care and all the other things. So the number of MPs must be cut, but not eliminated, because we remain a single country. Now we need to do that in a way that's satisfying to both sides, and then we need to start in earnest on sorting out the way our politicians behave.
Mhm.
And of course, Scotland has been dominated for the past generation by the Scottish National Party and by the Labour Party. The Labour Party is saying, vote for us or you'll get the bastard Tories.
Yeah.
The Scottish National Party is saying, vote for us and we'll save you in perpetuity from the bastard Tories.
Yeah.
And the Labour Party. That's what they say now as well.
Yeah. Now you've been saved from the bastard English. We no longer we can no longer impose the poll tax on you because, well, let's see how it works in Scotland before we try it in England.
That was talk about disaster, man.
Yeah, I know. But the poll tax was a rotten idea wherever it was tried first. But that won't happen again.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't need to worry in England that we'll have a Labour government kept in with Scottish votes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with that, as I said, it means that the dominant parties, the hitherto dominant parties, sorry, I sound like a Marxist, the hitherto dominant parties in both countries will start to break up. And if they don't break up, they'll have to respond to people's wishes in ways they haven't done so.
Mm-hmm.
So there are reasons for optimism. It's always possible that, let's imagine this.
Yeah.
David Cameron may have set up or may simply have stepped into what you could describe as a killing field for Labour.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
David Cameron has said that, yes, everything that was brokered by Gordon Brown will be delivered. But of course, step by step with Scottish devolution, there will be the safeguarding of English interests.
Mm-hmm.
English votes for English laws. This can't be done before the election. There's only 8 months to go. And so the Conservatives will make a set of detailed promises. Now, if Labour goes along with this, they will lose their Scottish strongholds, ditto the Liberal Democrats.
I think they've already lost the Liberal Democrats, to be fair.
Yeah, I know. And you see, even if Labour does go along with it, the Conservatives will say, well, these people have no interest in delivering on what they promise. This manifesto commitment is a giant fraud, whereas we quite obviously do mean it because it's in our interests and in yours as well. And so if Labour goes along with this, on the one hand, they'll be denounced as liars, preparing to defraud us again. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, they will be feeling very queasy about it because it means that they'll never form another government. Mm. If, on the other hand, Labour tries to weasel out it by saying, well, no, we don't want this, we want a constitutional convention at which all various options will be discussed, then they will start to lose votes in solid Labour seats. Mm-hmm. Because at the moment, there are people who vote Labour regardless of how crap Labour is.
Oh, yeah, I see it all the time.
Yeah, but once you go and tell someone in Doncaster, okay.
Oh, a city I'm actually very familiar with.
Yes, not my favourite city in England. Now, you tell an elector in Doncaster, if you're a Labour government, what's going to happen is that the Scottish they'll continue to get their free long-term care for the elderly, which is an enormous burden on us. They will continue to get free university education. Yeah. They'll continue to get, I don't know, X, Y, and Z. Did you get free prescriptions?
Yeah, we do,
we
do, Sean, yep.
Although, I have heard that the money that the Scottish government used to fund the free prescriptions in England, that was used for a cancer drugs fund.
So we've heard.
That's my understanding of it.
Right. Well, the headline is that you get free prescriptions, we don't.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
You tell an elector in Doncaster, Labour is going to keep that going, and Labour is also going to keep it up so that their MPs get to vote on our laws, and we don't get to vote on theirs. And you may find that people whose families have voted Labour for, 60 generations will just not vote Labour.
Yeah.
They may not vote Conservative, but they'll stop voting Labour. They'll sit on their hands. So if you ask David Cameron to sort out the immigration shambles, or to roll back political correctness, or even if you ask him to reform the law of land registration, you can trust him to make a mess of things.
Yeah.
And you certainly won't trust him to take us into war, because he'll tell us lies to get us into it, and then he'll lose it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the one thing you can trust him to do is to stuff his opponents, because that's the thing that he's been doing every day since he was about 12. And so he may well have set up a killing field for Labour and the Liberal Democrats with this. If you're very conspiratorial, why did he agree so quickly in 2012 that there would be a referendum? Why did he allow the question to be put? Why did he allow a yes/no question?
Yeah.
Why?
Especially when he's on the no side, because
Such
that's
a
the more
negative.
it's the more
negative
negative view.
side.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's right. Why did he just go along with this? Is it because he's stupid, or is it because he saw 3 or 4 moves ahead on the chessboard?
It's interesting. I think it is interesting, and I do like to wear a tinfoil hat sometimes, Sean, and I do like to think that perhaps they're not as stupid as they may appear to be.
Well, I don't think they would have got into the positions they were if they were so stupid. And
Well,
the fact of the matter is, like you were mentioning, the Labour Party, and we just have to. I mean, the Labour Party, if they'd have backed independence, it would be having a whole different conversation here. I mean, the fact of the matter is, the Labour Party, in the minds of, I mean, Glasgow was a Labour Party stronghold for years. And then in 2011, a lot of people defected to the SNP. Even our constituency, which was a total safe Labour seat, went SNP. And it was because at that time a lot of Labour voters didn't agree with the idea of a referendum, but they bought into the SNP's positive vision of Scotland, and they rejected what was perceived as negative campaigning by Labour at the time. So I actually think that Labour have dug themselves a massive hole in Scotland now, because Glasgow was, really overwhelmingly voted yes in this referendum. And the fact of the matter is, now the Labour Party are perceived as traitors by a huge percentage of the population, so I actually think that they've sort of dug their own grave in a way.
Labour had no choice, because Labour is the British National Party. Well, that gives them
it does a little bit.
Labour is the national British Party. It's the one we've got. The Conservatives have virtually no presence in Scotland, and the Conservatives are the English National Party. They may not like to call themselves that, but that's what they fundamentally are. And Labour is a party of the entire union, and so they couldn't back independence. They couldn't do that. And Labour is the big loser, I think.
I think so. I think any way you look at this, Labour have messed themselves up. But Sean, thanks so much again for coming on. We love to have your perspective, and it's been great.
Oh, I enjoy this. I enjoy it no end.
Oh, we absolutely love it too. And we'll hope to do it again.
Yes, indeed. And this time we haven't had continual dropped lines, because this time I'm in a deal. I'm not 40 miles outside Bratislava in the Slovak Republic.
Sean, don't give away my excellent editing.
Yes. Okay. Well, anytime. And, my last words are, things might go tits up, but the way things appear to be working out is probably the best outcome for all of us.
I think you're probably right, actually, and in a sense. Okay, Katie?
Yep, so everybody for listening, thank you so much. Sean, thank you so much for coming on the show. And for more libertarian podcasts, writings and news, go to greengetpodcast.co.uk.
Yeah, and Sean, thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.